Welcome to VR, the Metaverse, and JavaScript.
Allow myself to introduce myself.
For today, I'm going to do an intro, introduce myself, introduce kind of what we're here to talk about today, give some background on myself and some projects I've worked on. Then we're going to get into the building blocks of VR, how you can use your JavaScript skills and HTML skills to build really cool 3D content on the web. Then we're going to talk into the metaverse, and hopefully I can convince you that it's more than just a buzzword, and it's something interesting worth your time. And then we're going to talk about monetization options, how you guys can make money off of content that you guys are working on, whether it be VR or not. I'm Quinn, married. I've got 3 kids, 2 in high school, 1 in middle school. I live in Greendale, Wisconsin. I've lived in Wisconsin almost my entire life. I started coding in 4th grade in the 90s. I learned BASIC, which I was a big fan of at the time. My great uncle tried to copy a game for us and ended up copying a bunch of BASIC source code onto the disk. And so I got all of his son's college work for UW-Madison at the time, and that's how I learned to code, was basically by reverse engineering BASIC code that I had found. And also, I started with computers pre-internet. So when I started, it was all bulletin board systems, BBSs, where you dial up for your computer into another computer, and that's how we did all of our file sharing, talking to people, all those types of things were done via BBS, which I think you'll also see kind of in the aesthetic of Emerspace and kind of how we view communicating on the internet. Because of those things, I got really involved in hacker culture, really loved the idea of it, got into security, loved trying to take things apart, understand them, got into phreaking, the phone version of hacking, and then basically hacking in the mid to late 90s. This led to me getting raided by the Department of Justice and the local South Milwaukee Police Department when I was a senior in high school, which was not the best way to go. Because of that, I lost a scholarship to go to college, and so I ended up joining the Air Force and became a firefighter and a civil engineer for the Air Force, and then did a tour in Iraq as well. When I came back from Iraq, I started at UWM full-time, building mostly web applications, and also built their first mobile app that would track shuttle buses, track if your laundry's done, all kinds of other stuff, show you where your classes are on campus, which led to me teaching a class for school information studies on how to build applications and how to build mobile apps as well. And then we built a program called the App Brewery, which paired student developers who wanted to learn how to build apps with nonprofits, as well as researchers from the Medical College of Wisconsin who needed apps that couldn't afford them. So it was like a very good kind of private-public partnership in a lot of ways, to get students trained as well as to build really cool content. And it still exists to this day at UWM. Since then, I've bounced around, worked at a couple different places doing everything from marketing to controlling oil wells via satellites. And then for about 2.5 years, I worked at 3Data, which is kind of the most relevant to this discussion. Basically, the idea behind 3Data is to take an existing security operations center, network operations center, which is just a bunch of screens and a bunch of people like looking at data, and turn that into a 3D VR experience. So inside of a VR headset, you've got infinite screens and room to spread out and look at data. But not just looking at 2-dimensional screens, you can also look at your data in 3 dimensions. And so this is a prototype that I worked on when I was at 3Data, which analyzes a Meraki network. So Meraki is one of Cisco's products. And when you have computers connect to it, you can visualize what those computers are doing in different ways. So this one right here, you can see there's a big giant triangle that's spinning really fast and bigger than the others. That's someone doing a Windows update on the network. So you can kind of look at all the other network going on in the traffic, and you can have some outliers stand out to you right away in VR in ways that it doesn't do it the same way inside of a 2D screen. And then also you can do video, camera feeds, things like that. While building VR full-time, one of the things we found is that there's a lot of C-suite people, CEOs, CFOs who are just never going to put on a headset. They're just not interested in it. And so part of our product was to also build 2D interfaces for that 3D content. So scaling it to iPads and mobile devices, as well as like a big Cisco WebEx board like this, where someone can, show you data, do some data storytelling. You can have someone jump into VR and point out different things to you, or even do remote presentations via what we were building. Another application of this is augmented reality. So this is an example that we did with the Magic Leap 1. So it's using the exact same software we were talking about before, but you can basically drop out the background and then have people interacting with an augmented reality. So on the left, you can see that's the VR room that we're in, but then we're also augmented reality because that's the hardware we're using. So there was a group of hackers called the Ghost Squad hackers, and I think 2018 or 2019 dumped a bunch of ISIS cell phones on it to the internet, just gigabytes and gigabytes of data of phone calls, phone records, pictures, GPS data, all kinds of information like that. And so we were able to bring that into VR and show that in different ways. And actually, Jacob helped out with that project, which was to figure out, based on just the call logs, we could reverse engineer their organizational structure. So based on who called who in each different country, you can figure out, well, this is definitely the leader in Libya who only talks to people in Libya. This is the leader who only talks to other leaders, and so forth. So it's, I think, really cool application of the technology in kind of different ways, whether it be VR, AR, crunching data and whatnot. Any questions so far? Oh, I'm not getting the chat. Oh, okay. All right, now I see
You're
it.
a rock star. You're a rock star, Quinn. This is Dulce.
Thank you. So if there's no questions, I'll go into some of the building blocks of building 3D content. These are not all the options available. There's a lot of different options out there. These are just 3 that I think are maybe the most relevant to people coming from a JavaScript background. And you can make an argument to put others in here, and that'll be true for probably every slide I have in here. But 3JS has been around for 11 years. It's probably the most well-known project. A-Frame is actually built on top of 3JS. So if you're comfortable with 3JS or you find 3JS code, a lot of times you can build components inside of A-Frame that take advantage of that. In Babylon.js, I wrote off for a long time because I'm not the biggest Microsoft fan. Outside of VS Code, I try and stay away from a lot of Microsoft stuff, but Babylon.js has gotten a lot popular over the years, and a lot of developers I've talked to have really, really liked some of the changes they've made. So I won't shortchange it anymore. By the numbers, 3JS has 400,000 downloads a week via NPM, 75,000 GitHub stars, and about 1,500 contributors. A-Frame's a much smaller project, less than 7,000 downloads per week, 13,000 stars, and so on. It originally started outside of, or with a bunch of Mozilla engineers, but now it's run by a company called Supermedium, who are kind of the main maintainers of the project. And then Babylon.js is maintained by Microsoft. It's got 10,000 downloads per week and about just under 400 contributors. I also want to show the Google Trends just so you can get an idea of people who are searching this, who are asking questions, looking up stuff on Stack Overflow, just to kind of get an idea of what the relative popularity of these frameworks are. I'm a big A-Frame fan, and so that's kind of what I'm going to show the most examples of today. I put a list of resources in here that you guys can take a look at. There's some really cool articles. If you've never used A-Frame before, this intro to WebVR is a really good one, and this Otto Rose Cannon is a pretty recent post from just last month, talking about specifically how to do AR stuff, which I'm not going to cover too much. But if you are interested in augmented reality, she's got some code snippets here, and then shows you how you can run with that. So I wanted to get into a demo and show kind of how you get started with A-Frame pretty quickly. First, I'm going to show some of the examples from the A-Frame site, just so you guys get kind of an example. This is kind of their version of a hello world, which is just these kind of couple shapes sitting on the screen. but they have examples of how to do 360 images, how to do different user interfaces. They have a version of Beat Saber. If you guys have ever done Beat Saber, it's a game where you can kind of exercise by hitting blocks, kind of floating out in space. They made a web VR version of that, so you can come on, pick a song, and then actually play through. So we can't play through because we're doing this via web browser, but if you have an Oculus Quest or something like that, you can use that to play the full game. Over here on the side, you'll see that there's kind of like these little controller icons, and those are trying to tell you that you need a controller to actually really play that experience. But I noticed like hand tracking should have a controller, but for some reason doesn't, just so you guys are aware. Another cool example is Chevy Silverado did this a while back. It was basically kind of a way to show off their product. So they've got a 3D model of a truck that I can kind of spin around and look at in different ways. I can change the trim options. I can change the color. Oops. And then they have it interactive, so you can learn more about their product and things like that, which is kind of a cool way to be able to highlight a product. What I wanted to show you guys is the A-Frame glitch starter project. So if you go to glitch.com/A-Frame, you'll get to this kind of main A-Frame example site. And if you click remix your own, you can basically edit this in real time. If you guys have ever used Glitch before, it's pretty great. So once this loads, you can make changes real time and kind of view how this works. So this is kind of a basic example where we're just adding in the script tag, which includes the A-Frame framework. And then once you have that, you can start using these special tags. So a scene sets up the initial scene. And I'll show what it's doing behind the scenes as we move on. And then we're adding a couple what are called primitives. So there's a box, a sphere, a cylinder, and a plane, and as well as like the sky, which is just the color of the room around us. So for example, if I just were to change the hex color of this, you should see that kind of darker green happen basically immediately. So with Glitch, you can open this in a new window. And you guys are probably on Windows anyways. Control-Shift-I opens up your developer tools, or Command-Shift-I on a Mac. When you're using A-Frame, Control-Alt-I or Control-Option-I on a Mac will open up the scene inspector. So this is a 3D interface where you can kind of look around and move objects around. When we set up that scene tag, it automatically added a couple entities in addition to the primitives that were in our code. It added a camera and 2 lights. So if I click on this camera entity, you can see that this is the user perspective of what they're looking at when they load the scene. So because I didn't move around this person, they start at position 000, but within A-Frame, 1.6 is 1.6 meters high. That's basically a person's height. So that instead of you coming into the room on the floor, you're coming in like a person basically at eye level, more or less. It's just kind of an average height that they put in there. And then these light objects, you can see inside the room as well. If you come down, this is inside this inspector, I can change these values to move objects around. And then I can also change component values as well. So if I look at this light, this is a directional light, and this other light is called an ambient light. So I'm gonna disable both of them, and you can see that the scene basically goes dark. And so if I enable the ambient light, you can kind of see it's lit up again. And if I enable the point light, you can see that if I move this light around, it's going to change the lighting on all those objects in the scene. Whereas if I were to turn on the ambient light and move it around, it has no effect because it's the ambient light for everything. And you can use these light combinations together to get different lighting effects. Like if I want to do a Halloween game or something, I could change it to down lighting or something like that to give it kind of a more dramatic feel. Any questions about what we've covered so far?
Yeah. Yes. One thing I'm wondering, what are these like all these things, like including 3JS, what are they based off? Like, do they use they use WebGL under the HUD or something else?
Yeah, they do. So 3JS talks to WebGL directly because no one really wants to code WebGL from other developers I've talked to. Everyone kind of hates it, which is why 3JS is a great wrapper to be able to interact with WebGL. And then A-Frame is built on top of 3JS, so it's another layer on top of 3JS. So that's kind of how they work together, if that makes sense.
Does this work at all with Blender?
So if you develop an object inside of Blender, you can export that out in a bunch of different formats. One of the best formats is probably GLTF or GLB. You can export that out and then bring that in as an asset. So even animations, things like that work really well. But we've got Dulce on the call. She's a 3D animator, 3D modeler that I work with, and she can probably go into a lot more depth if anyone has any other Blender questions.
Yeah, I can take questions.
Yeah, I
can take questions if you have.
Is there any support for like rigs?
For rigs, yes. So you can rig up your model. So you can rig up your model and animate it. And animate it. Yep. And there are plugins as well that you can bring in add-ons for Blender that help you export properly. There's a plugin for hubs that allows you to set up your scene in Blender. And there are different WebGL-based type plugins that you can add to Blender that will help you better make your models for web display.
Awesome, thank you.
I had the A-Frame docs linked on another page, but these are a great resource. Like for example, if you want to add a 3D model, they'll have examples in here of how to add models and how to interact with things. Then if you scroll down to the bottom, they'll have all the primitives listed. So how to generate a box, how to generate different shapes and other primitives within the framework. So for example, if I wanted to create a torus knot, I can just copy out this little snippet of code, put it into glitch. It's a little hard to see, I think, because we're zoomed in. But if I move around, you can see I've got this giant torus knot now inside of my project. So if I want to reduce the size of that, let's change the radius to 0.5 meters. And now it reloads, and I've got this much smaller object. And then if you are operating within the A-Frame inspector, and say I wanted to position this object, these handles work. Oops, I clicked on the wrong objects. I can, move this so that I can kind of, make it popping out of the circle, almost like it's hair or something. And then once you get the coordinates of where you want it, you can look at what the position is. Let me click on the torus knot. And here the position is 0, 1.9, -4.5. So if I want to add that to my project, I could just add a position attribute here. What was it? 1 point something? Oh, it reloaded. -4.5. And so now it's updated within my project. So I wanted to show how some of the components work. There's an environment component that a lot of people use. And it allows you to basically easily bring in other components into your into whatever you're building. So I'm going to add this script tag for our component. And then add in this entity. So when this entity is now part of my project, it loads this environment component. And I can pass this environment component parameters as well. So if I said that I wanted to use a preset called forest. Oh, whoops. There we go. Now we've got our scene in the woods. I don't know if you guys can see, but that green plane is now kind of glitching out. because it's at the exact same position as the floor of the environment. And so if you see things like that happen when you're developing, the rotation and position are always kind of in these three numbers, which if you hold up your hand like this, it's always X, Y, and Z going away from you. And it's always in that order. So X, Y, and Z. So the middle number is always the Y position. So if I were to change this Y position to just 0.01, sorry, I think okay. Now you can see that as I move around, that plane is now sitting on top of the environment. So you don't get that, that weird glitch effect anymore. So another example I wanted to show was doing like a 360 background. And so I think they have an example of how to do like a full-on 360 image gallery. But just to add in an image, you can use this sky component where you can basically put in an image and it'll wrap your entire world around with that. So I'm going to take off the environment component. And I linked to Ecto Rectangular Photos. There's a group on Flickr that have a bunch of photos that you can use with various copyright on there. So I'm going to download, holy cow, that's huge. I'm going to download this photo. Yeah, maybe this one's a bad example because it's 67 megs. So I'm going to download something a bit smaller. Now I'm going to add this. I'm going to upload it to my glitch project. I'm going to copy this assets section into my project, which basically helps load in assets into your A-Frame project. And instead of loading sky.png, which doesn't exist, I'm going to copy the URL for the image we just uploaded. And now instead of using this color, I can basically tell it that I want to use the ID by passing in a source with a pound and then whatever the ID is. And so now you can see we have a 360 wrap. And so if I move around, the background stays the same, but I can have different content kind of loaded inside. So one of the things I want to talk about is networked A-Frame. This is a project that allows you to bring in multiple people into the same VR space. Someone in the chat asked if A-Frame has support for physics-based rendering. I think Dulce might be the best person to answer this if you're still on the call, Dulce.
Yep, I was actually going to reply to the chat. It does. So anything physics that you can do in Babylon.js or in Three.js can be applied in A-Frame, as well as native Three.js rendered scenes and in Mozilla hubs.
So there is a glitch project for networked A-Frame. It comes with a very small Node.js server, which basically helps with some of the WebRTC sockets between all the users. And then under the public folder in the index, it's a bit more complicated than the basic A-Frame hello world. But I'm going to open this in a new window. And so now these two users can see each other. So for example, if this user looks up at the sky, I can see that that user is looking up at the sky. Or if I come in really close to this user, now we're looking right at each other. So this is a really great example if you want to be able to have avatars. They're just using spheres in here that are laid on top of each other to create eyes and a head, but it could be a 3D model. It could be whatever you like to have avatars inside of A-Frame. Before we go into Metaverse, do you guys want to see how to build a component? A custom component inside of A-Frame?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to go back to our glitch example. They've got really great docs that go into depth of how these things work, but I'm just going to kind of cheat and steal this little bit of code right here. I'm going to create a new file. We'll call it snowman.js. And I'm going to paste in kind of this just starter code. So this is how you register an A-Frame component. You can call it whatever you like. So in this case, we're going to call it snowman. And then it has a bunch of lifecycle functions. So there's an init when it first hits the page. There's an update if any of the attributes are changed. There's a tick, which runs every single basically frame render as your application is running. You can call something when it's removed. So if you want to remove event listeners, things like that. And then there's pause and play if it's basically paused and played within the scene. So for our init, I'll show an example of, I'm going to first go into our index. And I'm just going to add our component code. And then inside of our init, I'm actually going to get rid of this sphere for now and get it out of the frame. And I'm going to programmatically create it in JavaScript. So instead of laying it out as an HTML component, I'm just going to create it inside of here. So we'll say, so I'm going to create a snowman by creating a couple spheres that I'm going to stack on top of each other. So we'll say document, create element, oops. And then I want to be able to set the position. Radius of color. I'm going to change the color to green just so that we know that this is actually working. So now that we have created this object, we have to add it to the scene. So within an A-Frame component, there's this.l, which refers to the element that your component is currently on. And in that, it has a reference to the scene element. So this is how you get a reference to the scene element, and then you can append a child, which would be our bottom sphere. And so now inside of our HTML, I can add an entity. I really need a VS Code autocomplete right now. And I can add the attribute snowman, and now I've got that green circle there, which isn't that impressive. But we can also add our own functions inside here. So init, update, tick, remove, pause, play. Those are all just lifecycle functions, but you can create your own. So if I wanted to create a function just to make spheres, I can add that in. I'm just going to refactor this. And we probably want to pass in position, radius, and color. So now we've got our sphere back. So let's make another one and make it a little bit higher. So if this is a snowman, these should probably be white. And then this one should probably be a little bit smaller. So let's say 0.75, maybe too small. I'm going to move that just because that should be the bottom, and then this one will be the top. So this one will be the highest. So now we've got a basic snowman component inside of A-Frame. Now, it'd probably be easier just to load a 3D model, but this is just to show an example of how you can combine primitives together, build out a component that mesh multiple things together, and then start adding behaviors. You can start adding click handlers and different behaviors so that when events are fired, these objects become interactive. Oh, looks like I missed a whole bunch of chat messages. Okay, so I think Dulce answered a couple of those. So I'm going to move on unless anyone has anything they want to bring up. Cool. So the metaverse. Does anyone have a definition for the metaverse that they would like to share with us?
I can.
Go for it.
Okay, so my definition of the metaverse is twofold. You have the highway, which is the cyberspace highway, the internet, and then you have destinations on that highway, and that's my utopian idea of the metaverse, where multiple domains and multiple entities have metaversal spaces that you can travel to and carry your own personal identity and your own personal objects with you into each one of those. That's the utopian idea in my mind of what the metaverse should be. And it's an immersive space that includes both completely immersive VR, or actually 3 elements. It includes completely immersive VR, it includes augmented reality that's mapped over the real space, and it includes any type of messaging notifications that may come to you based on both of those different overlays, the immersive one or the augmented one. I don't know. I don't know if that sounds good to you guys, but that's my ideal version of what the metaverse is. And I don't think it should be funneled at all into any one company. And right now, all the big three are trying really hard, or actually the big four are trying really hard to funnel the metaverse. So it's really cool that we're having this conversation, because then the more people who make their own metaversal experiences and scenes, the more fragmented it is and more options we have.
Dave D says this sounds like William Gibson stuff in the chat. And I think that's absolutely true. Maybe more of a succinct definition. I'm glad Dulce gave us her definition, because I think everyone I've talked to has a different definition of this. My colleague Will shared some of these with me this week, or last week rather. But Tony Parisi, who's been around in the VR space for a long time, I think he's created VRML, virtual reality markup language, which was early VR technology, and also GLTF. He has these rules where he explains what the metaverse is. So he says there's only one metaverse. The metaverse is for everyone. No one owns it. It's open, which kind of go hand in hand maybe. It's hardware independent, and it's the internet. Then I read an article from Blair McIntyre, who's another developer I respect a lot. And he says almost the exact same thing. Or I'm sorry, the exact opposite of what Tony Parisi is saying. It's a short read, but it's pretty interesting that they have such different ideas of what it is. And then there's an article, I think, about Facebook that came out the 27th, where they define it as virtual spaces where you can create and explore with other people, which I think is kind of a terrible explanation. Like Dulce had talked about it being immersive, which I think is one of the things that this is missing, because I feel like this definition could be a Trello board. Like a Trello board's a virtual space where people create and explore things. Like it doesn't really capture, I feel like, what the metaverse means to me anyways. That being said, no one knowing what the metaverse really is, I guess it's up to us to kind of create it, which is the fun part. I put in this reference to War Games, talking about Facebook specifically. So Facebook is launching their Horizons project, which is trying to make a metaverse. I worked on a grant project called Emerspace. It's funded through Grant for the Web. I put a link to our grant report here if you want to check it out and take a look at what it is. But basically, the idea is there's this great A-Frame project called Mozilla Hubs that a lot of people have used for a lot of different things, but it allows you to create a virtual space where people can interact either with their web browser, with their phone, with a VR headset, with whatever hardware they have. They can come into this virtual space together. It's open source. You can run this on your own server. You can run in AWS. And you can basically connect with your friends or with other people. And it doesn't look like it's loading.
Oh boy.
What page is that?
I just created a new room in Hubs.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Quinn, that's probably my fault.
That's all right. Mozilla Hubs is kind of this software to create these virtual spaces. But the one thing that we thought it was lacking to really call it a metaverse is kind of the social networking aspect on top of it. So we looked towards a project called ActivityPub. ActivityPub is a W3C standard for creating a social network. One of the problems that we have with walled gardens, the way that social networks exist right now, is that they're purposely walled off because it's not in the company's best interest to share with anyone else. So if I'm on LinkedIn and I want to talk to someone on Facebook, I can't do that because they're purposely built that way. you might be able to talk to someone between Instagram and Facebook only because Facebook bought them and they became part of the board. But really, like, you can't communicate with anyone else outside of that. And one of the best ways I've heard this explained is that, like, what if email worked this way? What if you had a Gmail account and you couldn't email anyone who had a Microsoft 365 account or a Hotmail account or whatever, Proton Mail? You could only email people within your same domain. It wouldn't make any sense, and no one would have used email to begin with. And so I think that's kind of what ActivityPub solves, is that it creates a subscription model where you have actors within the system who are your users, and you can subscribe to other people's activity and they can subscribe to yours. And that's how you can basically create those social networking connections. So for Emerspace, if you go there and you're logged in, sorry, I'm trying to move around the Zoom video all the time. If you log in, you'll see your own profile page where you can see friends, if they're online or not. There's an inbox where you can see when people come and go, or they can leave you messages. There's an outbox of what you're doing. And then you can also create your own virtual spaces. So I'm going to go to, let's see here.
Maybe you should try Firefox.
I was having worse results with Firefox when I tried it earlier.
You know what I think is happening? FYI, everybody, I don't know if you're having these experiences where you are, but I know up and throughout California, a new ISP came into town, and they're wreaking havoc on everybody's internet connection right now. So I don't know if you're probably having the same issue there, if that ISP's there wreaking havoc, but yeah.
So this is Mozilla Hubs. On top of Mozilla Hubs, there's a local chat. There's always been a chat inside Mozilla Hubs. We added our own, which is federated. And the way that this works is you can post publicly to anyone who's not even inside this room, almost like a Twitter message. You can post just to people in this room, or you can post to people in this room and your friends. So you've got these privacy options built in to the Emerspace chat. You also have a list of people. So it'll show you your friends if they're online, and if they are online, it'll show you where they are. So I'm gonna see if I can do this in an incognito tab, and hopefully the internet is okay with it. And so now I'm not logged in at all. So I'm going to go through the registration process for Emerspace. And so if you have a login, you can log in. Otherwise, you can register. So call this person Demo Dude. So one of the things we've been asked is, like, why have emoji passwords? And the reason is because keyboards suck inside of VR. They're really hard to use. And emojis are a lot easier to just point and click at. So if you click at a couple different emojis, you'll notice that it's adding multiple characters for each emoji I put in. So even if I have a 3 or 4 emoji password, it's actually just as strong as an 8 or 10 character password. Plus it's easier to put in VR. So when you're registering, you can either do just a regular password, or you can do an emoji password for those reasons. So I'm going to sign up. My account should be created, and I should get redirected. So now I can join into this room. It allows me to set my name for everyone else, and then also an avatar. So this is based on your Hubs account. You can load in as many avatars as you want. They kind of have the generic robot character, but there's also other avatars you can have. that are more photorealistic or whatever your style is. So I'm just going to say accept. Oh, and Will's in here too. So Will's in a VR headset, and you can kind of tell because his movements are a bit more natural. And also his hands are moving around.
Hello, I found you from my friends list and snuck into your room.
Awesome. So part of our
that's an
grant.
important feature to mention, though. In the friends list, you can find your friend anywhere on the metaverse, and that's through the activity pub. So that's the social aspect of it. And if they're on any Emmer anywhere, and you have your friend is logged in, you can find them.
Exactly. So one of the things I want to show, I was going to cover that next, Dulce, but I was going to show as part of the grant project. It's totally fine. We built a working chess game inside of Hubs. So when you come over to this little classic Mac, you can either pick which color you want to be. So if I click one of these, then I will spawn to a new location in the space, and then there'll be chess pieces down below me. I think we must have broke this in one of the recent updates, Will, because like the chess pieces are kind of the wrong size. But if I move this chess piece around and I put it in a place where it's not a valid move, it'll snap it back to where it's supposed to go. Or if I take it off the end of the table, it'll snap it back where it's supposed to go. And then if it's valid, you'll see it kind of turns green there, and I can drop the piece. And now it'll allow Will to go. If I try and move, it won't let me, even if it's a valid move, because it's his turn. So now Will can move. I can start bringing out pieces, etc. So what I wanted to show was, actually, since I have another browser tab here, for this user, I'm going to go back to the VRain main page. Because I'm monetized, which I'm going to talk about after this section, I'm running this monetization plugin. I get access to these premium scenes. And so we have an Alice in Wonderland room with animated characters. So instead of it just being normal chess pieces, they'll actually kind of wiggle when you pick them up, and they slash their swords and stuff like that when you actually play. So now I'm going to join this room. And now I'm going to go back to my other browser where Will and I are playing. If I go to, oh shoot, I forgot to make friends with that person before they left.
You can just make friends with me, and then I can find you through my friends list, and you can follow me.
That's all right, Will. I'm bringing that person back in the room.
Okay.
So you also notice when you start playing the chess game, we also grow your character 5 times as big. So you're a giant basically playing chess, and then all the other characters in the room are normal size and can run around with the pieces. So if I look, that's why these characters look so big from this perspective. But if I hit space on a keyboard, or if you click on someone with a VR controller, you'll get a menu. And this is just part of Hubs normally, where you can change someone's volume. So for example, if someone has a bad echo, or their mic is glitching out or something like that, you can turn them down or turn them up depending on what you need. That's what those plus and minus buttons are at the top. And then we added an add friend and block feature. So if I click add friend, that button now changes to request sent. And then from the other user's perspective, they'll have an accept friend button. So now we've now created a relationship inside of this inside of Emerspace and part of the activity pub. And so now, say this user leaves and goes and creates a new room. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. We're going to go to the Alice room. And now when I check my friends list, I can see that Quinn is online at Virtual Rain. And so now I can click on that user, and it'll take me to whatever server they're on, wherever they are, inside of another Mozilla Hubs. And so this is kind of one of the important features that I really like about Emerspace, as Dulce was kind of alluding to, is that there's this idea of discovery. So right now, WebVR, it's kind of hard to find other things that people are doing, like unless they're featured on the Firefox Reality webpage or something like that, that you find out about it. But ActivityPub allows these things to kind of naturally find each other and people to kind of reach out and make these connections. So that's what this content discovery tweet is all about. Is that this is a graph showing different social network instances. So Mastodon is kind of like, it's similar to Twitter, except that it's open source and it runs off of ActivityPub. And there's also other applications that are built off ActivityPub to share. Like, so instead of using YouTube, you can use PeerTube, or instead of using Instagram, you can use PixelFed. And so these are new social networking tools that you can either run in your own server from your house. You could put it up on your own cloud if you wanted to, invite your friends, and you can kind of create your own networks that can then talk to other ActivityPub social networks, such as Emerspace. And so that's what we're viewing as really the metaverse, is taking Mozilla Hubs, which is a really great kind of WebXR platform for meeting with friends, and then adding the social networking layer on top of it, which is Emerspace. Any questions about all of that? So that was the demo. One of the other things I want to talk about is the OMI group, the Open Metaverse Interoperability group. I put a link here to their website, also to their GitHub repo. They're kind of a similar project. They're trying to create basically an open metaverse along the same lines as what Emerspace is trying to do too. But I wanted to give them a shout out. If you're interested in this stuff, it's another project that you might want to check out. Monetization.
The internet. My God, it's full of ads.
I love that video for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is because, like, in the 90s, when they were trying to explain to people what the internet was, a lot of times they used visuals that look like what the metaverse does now. In order to kind of explain to someone that you put your credit card into a computer and order a product and get it sent to you, like, people couldn't wrap their heads around that, and so they used something that basically showed that it's a virtual space where there's commerce and there's things happening. There are a couple options when it comes to monetization. You can kind of go the old school route and put advertising in, which I think is a bad idea overall. There's a library or a company called Zesty, and they have an A-Frame integration. So you can drop this script into your project, you can create an entity and tie it into your creator ID, and you can start making money that way. But I think it kind of creates a lot of the problems that we have with the internet now with banner ads. And in VR, it's even more obnoxious because you can put ads potentially all over someone. And I just think it's generally a bad way to go. It doesn't mean that there might be certain projects where it wouldn't work or wouldn't be a good solution for what you're trying to do, which is why I added it as a potential here. But overall, I think it's probably a bad idea. One of the things I'm really excited about is web monetization. So webmonetization.org kind of talks about the motivation and how this would work as a technology. Right now, one of the big names is Coil. And in full transparency, they were part of the people who funded our grant project. So Grant for the Web is funded through Mozilla, Creative Commons, and Coil. Coil is a bunch of ex-Mozilla people who have created basically a platform for doing web monetization. So the idea, so there's a W3 spec, which you can see is a bunch of the Coil people are kind of leading kind of the charge and doing this. And then Coil itself, basically the idea behind it is, as a user, I pay a monthly fee, $5. And then wherever I spend my time, I'm streaming payments to that person. So if I'm watching a video, then I'm paying that person for watching their video. If I'm listening to their music online, so say it's like a situation where it's like a SoundCloud, and I'm listening to this person's music, I'm streaming it while I'm working, those payments are going to stream to them. They use a technology called Interledger, which allows you to basically point this at different like wallets. So you don't have to use any particular technology to make this work. Basically, like your Coil account is kind of a pointer that points your money to go in the right direction, more or less. But it's a really cool technology, and we've built it into Emerspace as kind of a proof of concept. So when I was at the first page of VRain, this will be grayed out if you don't have web monetization turned on. But if you do, these scenes will be available to you. We can also have avatars within the metaverse. So you can pick up objects, pick up things that are monetized and take those with you. So if I go to the Alice in Wonderland world, I can pick up special avatars, then take those with me to other servers and stuff when I go to. So that's kind of the basic concept behind monetization and how it works with Emerspace.
I think Jacob has a quick question about that. Does the money get split into smaller and smaller percentages as you use the web more in a given month?
From what I had read, Coil pays 36 cents for every hour a Coil member spends on your content. And there's certain things that I don't quite understand exactly how Coil works in terms of like, if you're like the users only, they're spending a flat amount of $5 a month. So what happens when they go over their limit? How does that all work? There's certain situations like that I'm not exactly sure how they handle. Will, if you're on the call and you know.
Yeah, so Coil guarantees for its creators that they get that 36 cents per hour of attention that they're getting from Coil users. There are, it seems to me, running on the 24-hour gym model of hoping more people pay for memberships than use up the time, I assume. And that's not the only way web monetization can work. It could also work that you just have money in your own wallet that you stream directly to websites when you're on them. There's just, since it's new, Coil's the only provider out there doing it, but there'll be more models in the future.
Yeah, it's basically brand new. Coil's been around for a while, but like the spec itself, I think was updated like last week, maybe. Yeah, 21 September. So this is kind of a moving target, but I think that this is a much better way to have a happy and healthy internet than to slam ads in front of people's faces all the time, especially when it comes to VR. I think this is a much better way to do it because it's based on engagement. It's not based on getting eyeballs on old school advertisements. So that's all the prepared stuff that I had for the talk. But if anyone has any further questions, we've got some super smart people on the call. Dulce, Will, Nat Cool's part of the industry as well. So if you have any questions, like I'm happy to open up to discussion. I don't know, Maggie, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. We skipped a couple. We've got a really good question from Joseph.
Can I add on monetization just for one quick second?
Absolutely, go for it.
Okay, just to piggyback on what we've done on VRain, there are quite a few NFT artists and NFT collecting houses that are now starting their own decentralized metaverses that are tied to smart contracts. And they're using multiple 3D engines and different frameworks to make this happen. You know, some are using A-Frame and 3JS. I'm yet to hear of, the Minnesota Twins are doing it with the Mozilla Hubs platform. And they're tying NFTs that are minted on the blockchain into the space, and they're, I guess, trading cards. So Coil's not the only game out there for monetization. There are others, and you can just set up smart contracts for your immersive spaces.
Very cool. All right, so we've got, Joseph had a question. What do you think it takes for WebXR to be at the point where native XR is at now? For example, most companies use mobile apps for AR experiences, and for VR, it's either mobile-based or on some desktop app most of the time, from my observation. One particular pain point for AR on web, I recall, was marker creation detection.
I can answer the web AR portion.
Go for it.
Well, web AR right now has gotten to the point where there are some frameworks out there that do not need marker anymore. You can do image tracking recognition. You can apply machine learning for object recognition. And there are quite a few companies that are really taking advantage of making their own web AR frameworks based around their product and their brand. And then there are some commercial companies out there, my favorite in particular, which is Eighth Wall, and they provide you services to make web AR, and they have all of the features. They have facial tracking, image tracking, object recognition. They're adding body tracking. I don't think they have multiple faces, but since it's on your own domain, you have free reign to develop it and to style it and to deliver it however you want. And you're not beholden to any app approval from Facebook or from Snap.
So that was one of the interesting things I kind of want to touch on with that question, was like talking about, well, when will WebXR catch up to like to native VR apps, like someone's building in a different framework or something. But I don't know that they necessarily have like the same use case. Like if I'm building like a AAA game, it's probably not going to be WebXR. It's probably going to be like a downloadable thing. But there's certain situations where WebXR makes a lot more sense because I don't have to download an app. I can just go to it on a website. But then there's discovery issues. So there's a lot of things to consider. It's not like one tool is the best necessarily for every situation. I think it's going to vary depending on what you're trying to build, what you're trying to accomplish. Does that answer it, Joseph? Is that who asked that?
Yes, Joseph asked.
Yeah.
And I would also say, check out that article from Ada Rose Cannon, where she goes over AR. That's just a couple days old. And AR used to be a lot more problematic. The last time I tried to do it was probably about 2 years ago. And it was a kind of a pain, like you're talking about with the markers and such. But I think it's come a long way. So I think it's definitely worth checking out again. Someone asked about, Dave D asked about, does the ad have to be flat or could it be convolved onto an avatar's t-shirt? Will had made an example when we first started doing web monetization inside of VR, where if a monetized person entered the room, fireworks would go off in the sky. So there's like you can basically tie the web monetization to certain components within what you're building. So certain components are only available if someone's monetized or if one monetized person's in the room. So you do have some options of like what you want to do. So if you wanted to augment someone's avatar or how they look, I think it's totally possible to do.
And Quinn, we've published open source A-Frame components to do all of that. So you can make things appear based on people being monetized or make things be interactive or not. I think that's how we power our premium avatars. It's in our HubSpot and our GitHub.
Yeah, I glossed over the Emerspace clients, or I didn't even gloss over, I just completely skipped it. But we do have basically a library here, which I think is really cool, with basically like, there's a high-level API and a low-level API that you can use to interact with this stuff as well. And the example here is that we've got this login on the documentation site itself. So if I log in with my...
You might have to minimize your view of Quinn to see this. His camera's over it on my screen.
Oh, you can't see it? You see that?
Here we go. Nice.
So now it asks me, you know, how much information like I'm comfortable with giving. So if I do just identity, it allows me to log in, but it won't let any of my friends know that I'm here on this particular website. If I click share location, then all my friends will know where I'm at. And you can add social features and even account maintenance where you can remove friends and things like that. So I'll say allow. And now you can see that I'm logged in here. Here's my avatar. and then it'll tell me if any of my friends are online currently. And if I were to go to my profile page, then you can see that I've arrived at the Emerspace client documentation site 15 seconds ago. So if this was an immersive experience and someone could join me there, or maybe, you know, you could just use this as a way to show what you're doing, things like that as well.
We had a question from Jacob. He had asked if you wanted to get recommendations for new groups based on specific topics, is that possible?
Quinn, can you take this one?
Were you going to talk about Guppy?
Yeah. Oh, you know about Guppy? Nice. So yeah, Jacob. So that's been an area of interest for me, not just in Emerspace, but in like the broader the Fediverse, the like federated social media stuff like Mastodon. And so I created a little app called Guppy. You can see it at gup.pe, and it allows people to create groups on demand and organize around topics. With the idea being of helping to expand your network around topics of interest. And since Emerspace is running on this standard, Web W3 standard ActivityPub, people could make standalone apps like Guppy that interact with it to do things like add features of groups and shared interest groups like I've done to add to Mastodon like this.
Very cool, thank you.
And then Dave, we are recording this, so we'll definitely make the recording available. I'm not sure if Quinn is willing to share slides or not.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And I should have pointed that out at the beginning of the presentation. It's down here at the bottom.
Oh, perfect.
So there's a bit.ly link, bit.ly/vr-metaverse-js.
Can you throw that in the chat? Is that
Yeah, absolutely.
cool? Perfect. All right, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, there's one question I asked in chat that
Oh, did I
didn't get
miss it?
answered
Oh, sure. Let me see. Sorry, Heather.
about
Yep.
if they handle identity, do they handle cases where somebody's identity changes?
Well, I mean, we don't really have the only sense of identity you really have inside of like what we've built so far is just a name and an avatar. The avatar you can change out as frequently as you like, and the same thing with the name as well. The one thing around identity is that if you block someone on one server, they're blocked for you across of all of Emerspace. So if someone's harassing you or there's some issue like that, that is one of the nice features I think that we've built in, is that a block works across all these servers versus having to block them in each instance that you go to. But in terms of identity, I mean, that's kind of the beauty of VR is you can be whoever you want to be. So, you know, you can use any avatar, any name that you like.
Awesome. All right. Anyone else have a question? Well, if not, Quinn, this was really, really